beside an unused union hall and an abandoned factory by the Allegheny River in another Rust Belt city. You can see the well-dressed families on Memorial Day reading the names on the walls of all those who went away, who went off in a ship, came back in a bag, packed into a coffin, wrapped up in a flag. I saw war on every stone, I read a name on every line, and when I reached the end, a chill.
Hello, and thank you for tuning in to this second episode of New Polemic, a production of PNN.TV. It is November 14th, just 3 days after Veterans Day, so I thought I'd take a little bit of time to talk about some of the approach that's been taken both locally and nationally in order to support the troops, and take a few minutes to talk about what it actually means to support our troops. There's several different ideas out there. You know, for some people, they believe that by sticking a yellow ribbon on the back of their car that somehow they're supporting the troops. You know, your little support your troops magnet made in China somehow is supporting the men and women who are dying every day because this country asked them to. Notice I didn't use the phrase protecting our freedom, because I have a hard time understanding what this war in Afghanistan is doing to protect yours and my freedom. Now, when I go to the airport and I'm trying to catch a flight, and I go through this nightmare that they call TSA, and they want to scan me to make sure I'm not wearing any kind of explosive device in my underwear, and won't allow me to take a full tube of toothpaste because, Lord forbid, I have an explosive in there. Now that to me seems like somebody is messing with my freedom. But guess what? That wasn't the Taliban. That wasn't the Al-Qaeda who imposed those things on us. It was our own government. We live in a time when our government would love nothing more than for us to live in fear. In my parents' day, they were climbing underneath the desks because the government had them afraid of the communists. Well, in our day, the communists have been replaced with terrorists. Now, I want to ask you an important question here. When somebody asks you, do you support your troops? What's that mean to you? You know, there's people who think, well, I send care baskets over, or I send some cookies over. Well, that's okay, and that's a nice gesture. But really, in my opinion, what you should be doing, and what we all should be doing if we want to support our troops, is demanding that our government pull us out of this war. We have been in Afghanistan longer than any other war in our history. And what have we accomplished? Are we ending terrorism? We're approaching terrorism. We're trying to fight terrorism with violence. And I tend to believe that terrorism thrives on violence. Nothing motivates a terrorist more than if you fight that with violence. We neglect our own history when we think that these folks are fighting us because of who we are. And we neglect the fact that we have been interfering in Middle Eastern politics for at least 60 years. And the best thing that we can do to eliminate terrorism is feed an empty belly. Instead of bombing somebody's house with a remote-controlled airplane controlled by some snot-nosed kid in Nevada, how about we make it possible for those people to eat? Terrorists would have a lot harder time gaining a foothold in some of these nations if these people had some opportunity to feed themselves. When you want to support your troops, call your congressman and tell them, I'm sick of this war. I'm sick of the censorship that goes on. that doesn't allow the American people to see the sacrifice that these young men and women are making on a daily basis. The sacrifice that these families, in this city that I live in, there are families that have been devastated by this war. For what? Well, we were attacked on 9/11. You're right. Less than 20 people attacked us on 9/11. 3,000 Americans died, and that was a terrible, terrible loss. But we're not going to stop that. We're not going to prevent that from happening by going to somebody else's country and destroying villages, chasing people out of their homes, and trying to remake other countries in our own image, which is exactly what we do. We have the arrogance to go to these countries that have been around for thousands of years and say, well, we know how you should be living. You should be living like us. Well, the smartest thing for us to do is get the heck out of there. If you want to prevent terrorism from getting a foothold in a country, fine. Help eliminate poverty in that country. But it's not our place to go and rebuild these countries in our own image. And right now, I think anybody could look at our country and say, who would want it? We're headed downhill fast. We have these huge deficits that everybody keeps talking about how we need to cut. And yet, we don't look at the military spending. And I'm not talking about the regular DOD budget that, makes sure that service members get a decent raise and that they have decent homes to live in. Those are honorable things. I'm talking about the billions of dollars that's spent on fancy equipment or on, next generation aircraft for an imaginary enemy that we don't even have yet. When many politicians tell you, well, you need to support your troops, what they really mean is that you need to support your local defense contractor. When Doug Lamborn fights for defense funding in this state, he's not talking about taking care of those troops. What he's talking about is Raytheon, ITT, Northrop Grumman, all of these defense contractors that depend on war to make a living. Do you think that the soldiers and the airmen and the sailors that are fighting this damned war have lobbyists in Washington looking out for their benefits? They have a few, I guess. They've got sergeants' associations and such. But you and I are the best thing that they've got when it comes to lobbying. You should be calling your congressman and telling him, you know what? I'm tired of this war. We need to be out of here. We talk about this, like I said, we're talking about this huge deficit, and yet defense spending, the fact that we've grown government in response to the war on terror, and what has it done for us? What has it really done other than to limit yours and my privacy? Well, it's okay for them to tap our phones. It's okay for them to check your email. It's okay to strip search you at the damn airport, or virtually strip search you at the airport. When does it stop? How much are you willing to sacrifice for your freedom? If we really wanted to approach this war honestly, we'd have a line item on our paycheck that would be taxing us to pay for this war. Every paycheck, every 2 weeks, this war should be paid for out of our checks directly. And then watch what people's attitude is. Because the bottom line is, people say, well, I support our troops. Yeah, how much would you support them if it was coming directly out of your paycheck? Would you still want to be fighting this war? I don't think we would. The closest thing we have to media coverage of the war is embedded journalism that gives us the rah-rah of a public relations spokesman that's been trained to deceive us. You see the reaction we get when something like WikiLeaks comes down and we actually get to see the reality of the war. People throw a fit. We have Americans dying every day. There's tens of Afghanis dying every day in this war. And what are we accomplishing? Do you feel more free? I get so sick of hearing the statement, well, they're protecting our freedom. Let's approach it honestly. They're protecting the war income of companies. That's it. That's all this war is being stretched out for. You cannot stop terrorism with violence. It's like putting out an oil fire with water. You throw the water on and it just scatters. We can chase terrorism out of Afghanistan, maybe. And we chase it to Yemen. And then we go and we chase it out of Yemen. And where does it go? Back to Afghanistan or anywhere, to Iraq. We see the state of Iraq after all this time that we've been there, all this money that's been invested, and it's just a mess. We cannot rebuild nations in our own image. We need to come back here. I understand. I'm a pacifist, but I do understand that sometimes nations have to go to war. It's just a nasty reality of human nature. But the fact is, we should only be going to war as a last resort. It should not be this preemptive crap. We shouldn't be going to war in a country based on the actions of 19 people. It's just absolutely ridiculous. Where does it stop? All these crazy terrorism laws have been used to prosecute Americans. But do you feel free? Do you honestly believe that the people dying in Afghanistan are giving their lives for your freedom? I don't. I believe what they're giving their lives for is the profits of companies that are able to go lobby in Washington and convince senators and congressmen to extend the war because, well, the economy is really bad, and if we stop now, it's going to hurt our bottom line. Well, screw your bottom line. What I care about is not another drop of American blood needs to be spilt on foreign soil. Where do we stop? So I guess really the bottom line is, what does it mean to support your troops? Does it mean sending them to endless wars in foreign nations with no hope of winning? So that they can die? So that they can spend more time in Afghanistan than they do with their new baby? So that, they can go off and die so that a child can be raised without a father or mother? Would you sacrifice your child for this war? I wouldn't sacrifice mine. There have been wars in the past that people could put a pretty good argument up that they were justified in fighting, or that the country was somehow a moral thing to fight. But to fight this war in Afghanistan, to destroy villages of destitute people because of a handful of terrorists, is ridiculous. And all it does is serve to fill the coffers of companies like KBR, who are making millions on this war. We use war as a means of profit in this country, and that is disgraceful. So I would encourage you to support your troops. Support them by demanding that we end this unjust war, that enough lives have been given, enough blood has been shed, and enough money has been spent. And acknowledge the fact that we are not innocent as a country, that we have brought many things on ourselves, that we have reaped what we sowed in the Middle East. The bottom line is we made a lot of enemies because we have this undying thirst for oil and we're willing to kill for it. Think about that next time you start the engine on your SUV. When you have a support your troops bumper sticker on the back of your Humvee that is demanding more oil from places that we have to fight to get it, think about how much you're supporting your troops then. Well, folks, I'm going to wrap up this show. It's been a short one, but I just wanted to take a minute to say, what does it really mean to support your troops? As far as I'm concerned, it means demanding an end to this damn war and demanding that we don't send them to fight wars unless it's our last resort. Well, until next time, this is Dan Freisinger signing off with New Polemic.
My spine for blank slates, for battlefields yet unknown, that soon some will call their own, a wordless message in a frame. For blank slates, for the dice that aren't yet tossed, for the lives that aren't